Tragic news from Colombia this time. Another big landslide triggered by heavy rainfall, guys. The images are frightening. So in the early morning of June 24th, 2025, a devastating landslide has struck the El Pinar and Santo Domingo neighborhoods. That's located on the steep hills between Medellin and Bello in the Aburrá Valley of Colombia. And the landslide occurred just before dawn as families were sleeping. So we know so far that at least 8 people are lost and 5 others are injured, and approximately 10 homes already were definitely buried under the rubble from this landslide of tons of earth and soil and debris. And this event unfolded rapidly. We know these landslides, they come down at full force very fast. Maybe you have seen my video about Switzerland, Blatten, that has buried a whole village. It took only 40 seconds. And this also came down rapidly with little to no warning, as days of heavy rainfall had saturated the already fragile slopes, the soil, the rocks. And the neighborhoods that are affected, they're part of a densely populated area made up of both formally developed zones and also informal settlements with poor people. Many families live in conditions of vulnerability on these slopes, often without access to secure housing, clean water, or emergency services. So they're even hit harder by that devastating landslide. Witnesses have described a loud rumbling just before the collapse, before the slide came down. And one resident guy said it sounded like thunder, but it didn't stop, it continued. Then the whole hillside came down. So it seems it must have made a noise when the masses of soil and debris was cracking away from the hillside. We have right now emergency services, including firefighters, civil defense, and community volunteers that are on site. They rushed to the scene. They began to search and also began rescue operations, immediately digging and crawling through mud and rubble in hopes of finding people. And they also used dogs to locate missing persons. Others in the community stood by, hoping for news of loved ones. So these hillsides of Bello, that's a municipality in the department of Antioquia in Colombia. Residents were still asleep when the mountainside gave way. The torrent of earth, rocks, and debris swept down really with terrifying speed and also burying these homes. So for now, they're saying it's more than 40 homes were either completely covered in mud and debris and destroyed. So the survivors of these homes emerged into a landscape of mud, shattered concrete, and overwhelming grief. And this was unfortunately, guys, not an isolated event. For years, the hills surrounding Bello and northeastern Medellin have been at risk for landslides. So this was a known problem, and especially during Colombia's intense rainy seasons. But the communities that are hardest hit this time have long lived on the edge, geographically and socially, as I just described. Granizal in particular, it's one of the largest informal settlements in the Aburrá Valley. It's nestled high on these steep slopes. It's home to tens of thousands of people, many of whom are internally displaced. They're fleeing violence, poverty, landlessness in other parts of the country, and they have arrived in search for safety and a chance to build a future. And what they found, unfortunately, was a hillside, unregulated, unstable, and far from basic services. The families that moved there constructed their homes with what materials they could find: wood, tin, cinder blocks, or on inclines that often exceed 45 degrees. So you can imagine there are no stable, solid foundations or anything. I mean, the mountainside itself is unstable already, so you shouldn't build there at all. So all that is no condition of comfort. Many live without drinking water, sanitation, electricity, and when it rains, when it starts to pour, these hills become incredibly dangerous. The soil shifts, the homes crack, and sometimes, as happened right now, entire sections of the slope collapse. They say all we heard was a deep roar, says one resident who has a home, one of the few that were spared. And then the resident said everything went dark. The earth swallowed the houses next to ours. When the landslide tore through this community, this was after, I said, many days of heavy rainfall. The waterlogged earth becomes very, very heavy and unstably, and especially on deforested steep slopes where the drainage is poor. So with no warning system in place, the people of Granzial had no chance to evacuate prior to this landslide. Thankfully, the emergency crews arrived quickly and began their desperate operation. They were setting up temporary shelters, but so many families had already lost everything they owned. Some were wandering through the ruins, looking for signs of loved ones. One clung to each other, trying to process what had just happened from one second to the other. And despite the speed of the emergency response, the challenges remain. The access roads are very narrow and often unpaved, muddy from the rain. So delivering aid, clean water, and medical supplies is often difficult. The terrain itself poses a risk. Another downpour could trigger more landslides, endangering the rescue teams. So the people here know this and they fear it. They greatly, greatly fear it. So this area is just not a name on the map. It's a living, breathing community, rich in culture, resilience, and human spirit. We really have to say that. The children there often go to makeshift schools. Women lead neighborhood efforts to organize supply and care for the sick. So it is a community, and many residents work long hours in Medellin and then they return home late at night. They're dreaming of a better life, but each year the rainy season reminds them how fragile their safety truly is. Because over the past decade, researchers and engineers have warned of the risk of a major landslide in these zones. The slopes above Granzial are classified as high risk due to their geology, steep angles, and the lack of vegetation that could give it some stability. So some pilot projects have attempted to install early warning sensors in neighboring areas, but coverage remains very, very limited. So a local geologist said today, "We have long known that this hillside was unstable. The question was never if something would happen, but when, and now the when has come." So in the aftermath of this disaster, the focus is already turning to humanitarian support. Community groups have begun collecting donations, food, clothing, hygiene kits, bedding. Churches have opened their doors. Some residents from nearby areas have volunteered to host displaced families. But this strategy, the landslide, in my opinion, also brought to light the urgent need for sustainable solutions like safer housing, formal infrastructure, and early warning systems that give residents at least a chance to escape future landslides. One mother that survived that landslide said, "We're used to surviving here, but this time we need more than hope. We need help to rebuild." They're not asking for luxury. They're asking for the right to live in safety, to drink clean water, to sleep through the night without fear that the mountain above them will collapse. The landslide is an absolute disaster, but for many families, it's also the final crack in a life that's already burdened. And the rain continues to fall on the hills above Bello, and you can't ignore that. So I will keep you updated how this develops. In the meantime, check out the video in the end screen. It's a threatening situation in Brienz in Switzerland again. And also there's news and new pictures from the Bello tragedy in Switzerland here in the end screen, guys. If you want to support the channel, links are in the description of this video. Stay safe, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.